Hi, I'm Jasmine Bowens, here with Dr. Cheryl Rice to talk about stereotyping.
Hello.
Hi. How is stereotyping defined?
Well, stereotyping, very simply, is when you take a certain amount of characteristics of something and make a decision about it without knowing for sure whether your decision is right or wrong. So a really simple example is if you're sitting in class first week of September and someone who's about 10 years older than you walks into the front of the room and has a bunch of books and a pencil and chalk. When you look at that person, you're going to assume that that's the teacher. And that's a very benign example of a stereotype that A, you're probably right, and B, you've seen so many other examples over the many years you've been in school of that happening, that yes, that person is the teacher. But it's not necessarily true, it could be somebody else.
Okay. Is stereotyping judging a whole group of people, or could it be just of one person?
It could be either. So for example, if somebody has beliefs about a certain group of people, usually a group of people that they don't belong to, then they might have opinions about that group just based on some faulty information or information that might be accurate. It could also be, and this is when it's more damaging, is when you have a certain attitude about an individual based on either other experiences you've had or other things you've seen on TV or in the movies or other things that people have told you. So it can be either one, either about an individual or about a group.
Okay. Do you think stereotypes come from the truth sometimes?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of a weird thing to say. Stereotyping is all of our brain's way, really, of making sense of all the information that's in the world. We get tons and tons of information every single day. And so our brains try and simplify things for us by making up categories. So, I don't know, all adults are, going to want me to be quiet is an example of a silly stereotype or whatever. So there are some stereotypes that have elements of truth to it. The point where stereotypes become harmful or damaging is when you have negative attitudes about a person or a group of people, again, based on either false information or information that's not true, or information that varies among people.
How does stereotyping affect a person emotionally?
Well, again, it sort of depends on what the stereotype is. So, and also depends on what happens to that person because of the stereotype. So for a real specific example, if someone who is from a different group, so for example, if someone who is African American goes in to apply for a job with someone who is white, and if that white person has a stereotype in his or her mind that people who are African American are not as smart as people who are white or as people who are Asian. And if that person then makes the decision about hiring that person based on that stereotype, that's discrimination. That's a very blatant example that historically has happened repeatedly and I believe still happens today. That, of course, is going to, whether or not the person is aware of why they weren't hired or whatever, but that can be devastating on someone's sense of self and sense of self-esteem. It's also infuriating because to be treated like that is wrong. And so it's wrong, it's unjust, and I think the person can experience a tremendous amount of anger and then also develop their own stereotypes about white people hiring them. So if you were not hired because one, white person was stereotyping African Americans, the next time you're interviewing for a job with someone who's white, you might believe, wow, I'm not going to be hired again because this person's going to be prejudiced or biased.
That's part of my next question. Does stereotyping happen on a regular basis, and can it stop someone from getting a job? As you already said, it may happen, but like on a regular basis, can I stop myself from stereotyping, or does it happen and I don't even know it?
Wow, those are two different big questions. The first point, stereotyping absolutely still happens. What's interesting now is that obviously there are a lot of things that have changed in the United States in terms of people having certain rights. I mean, having the right to vote, having the right to go into certain places. Even, you know, looking this year at the presidential race, we have candidates that would never in a million years have been up for election, even just 20 years ago, I think. So stereotyping and the effects of it have changed. They're not as blatant, but they do still exist. There are still people who are sort of subtly making decisions about other groups because of stereotyping. Which leads to part B of your question, is that for most people, the process of stereotyping is very, very unconscious. And that's what makes this one so difficult to fix. People make decisions all the time based on information that they don't even know where that information came from. One of the biggest places where that information came from is that people like to belong to groups. You're a Norristown student, so you like to know and believe that the Eagles are the best team that there is. You're part of, you know, the Norristown High School group. You guys all support that. Wanting to be part of that group is important. It's the same when someone is, you know, we're both part of the group of women, you know, and then people are part of groups of races or groups of a neighborhood or something like that. When people are part of a group, in order to feel better about themselves, they make their group the most important. And so anybody who's not in their group, they're more likely to see them all as kind of the same. So we might say, well, you know, all men are slobs. Well, it's, you know, it's a stereotype. It's funny. And it's true for some men, but it's not true for the entire group of men. But it's easy, you know, as women to say, oh, they're all just slobs. And it's an example of a stereotype that makes us feel good about women because clearly we're not slobs. And that's, again, a silly example, but it can get really bad. I mean, there are stereotypes about all different types of groups of people that then, you know, keep them from getting jobs that they might want, becoming friends with people that they might want, or just being treated in a way that everyone wants to be treated.
Okay. Why do we use stereotypes? Is it a social or biological problem? Like growing up, does your parents might say something and it sticks with you? Or maybe religious types, because that also has to do with stereotyping.
Yep, there are absolutely both biological and social reasons that we do it. One thing that scientists have looked into is they've discovered that a lot of it is personality. That there are some people that as early as 6 months old, they look like the kind of people that are more likely to have biases. So that part's not influenced by parents. The social part, absolutely. The things that our parents, the values that they hold, even the values that are within our religious groups can have an effect. But one of the most important things is that people tend not to really have that much experience with groups outside of their own. So you might grow up in an area where people are mostly of one race or mostly of one economic class. So growing up where you don't have the chance to be around people from all different groups is probably the biggest factor towards stereotypes becoming damaging. Because it's only if you really have the chance to prove those stereotypes wrong are you able to get beyond that. You know, so if you grow up in a place where everybody's the same, everybody believes the same thing, everybody does the same thing, then it's much easier to believe that people that don't do that must be bad or must be wrong or something like that.
Okay. What you were saying about the babies, how is that even possible?
It's just a personality thing. I mean, there's some traits that, you know, what they're seeing is that there are some babies that kind of immediately react to people coming in who are different from them. And there's some babies that just don't care. They're just kind of, you know, open and mellow or whatever. And again, it's just a personality quirk that then the environment can have a big impact on.
Can stereotyping lead to other unhealthy problems?
I think stereotyping and then specifically discrimination can lead to some terrible problems. I think the most extreme example would be people who commit hate crimes. You know, and you hear about that on the news a lot, that like, you know, somebody will paint something on a door, or some of the ones that have recently been in the news of people hanging nooses in order to make their point. These are people that they're not crazy or mentally ill necessarily, which is also a little bit scary. They're people that are very angry and have held a certain amount of stereotypes and racist and prejudiced beliefs, and then take the extra step of doing those things to intimidate the people that they hate or intimidate the people they don't like.
Or they just don't understand and they just feel that their way is the wrong way. Something like that.
Right, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that's, and that's one level of racism and prejudice, but to get to the next level where you're actually going to go out and try and scare someone or intimidate them, that's a whole new level of anger and hate, and something that would take, you know, I think people, pretty much everybody is prejudiced in some levels about something, and it's really important as individuals that you're able to sort of recognize that you do likely have some beliefs about other groups of people that you're not even aware of. Which actually, what keeps people from trying to become aware of these things and trying to get to know people who are different is fear or anxiety. Because you don't know what's going to happen, so you might assume like, oh well, this group of people isn't going to like me or isn't going to accept me, so I'm not going to get to know them at all, or I'm just going to sort of avoid them and go the other way when I see them. The best way to try and combat stereotypes and the problems with stereotypes is to deal with the anxiety and then move forward into it. So have confidence in who you are and be proud of who you are and the group you belong to, but then go out and meet people who are very different from you, even if it feels scary. That's probably the best thing that anybody on the planet can do.
Hi, I'm Jasmine Bones, here and listen up to talk about stereotyping. So do you guys even think you know what stereotyping means or have any idea?
I think stereotype is like a judgment of people, different groups of people or whatever. You can stereotype a place. You can stereotype even like the sex, like female, males, orientation, like if you're gay or straight. People stereotype that a lot.
I think like stereotyping is judging a book by its cover. Like, because I know if I read a book, I want to look at the cover first. Because if it's just all plain, then I don't want to. Like you, Gibbs. I know you like to read books. Do you think you have any idea?
Well, about stereotyping, like I said, it comes a lot from from who you're taught. That's how you're taught the stereotype, because your parents, that's where you learn a lot of it from. Because if you're in a certain place and you learn about a certain group of people, you can be like, oh, they must do this or they must act this certain way just because they're dressed like this or just because they live over here or they live over there, because it's different from what you are, because that's just what you're taught.
Yeah. Do you think?
I know when I was younger, my dad, he used to tell us, like, well, the girls, well, if you got a short skirt on, you're fast, quote unquote. So I guess he didn't want us just dressing like that, so he said, well, she's a fast girl, so.
Do you know any stereotypes that you have heard growing up? I know that's dead. Like, it's the craziest person. Like, red nail polish.
And my mom used to say something about red lipstick or something.
Like red clothing.
Like, who wears red anyway? Well, I'm
Well, I
talking
guess-
about, like, red lipstick, but I don't...
I guess like the old people,
Yeah,
the
I
older
think-
people say that because that's how they were back in the day. Like if you wore like red lipstick or like red nail polish, you were like fast or something like that. Like
Another
hot
example,
tamale. That's what a girl used to say.
Another example, like, because I want to get my nose pierced, but my dad, he's one of those old type people.
Pretty crazy, but, like, growing up, I've heard stereotypes as far as, like, not... I mean, like, if we're riding down the street or something, I did this myself, not my mom or anything. Like, if we're riding down the street, like, going towards, like, in the middle of North Hill off of Main Street near Papaguitos and stuff, and if I see, like, a person with raggedy clothes on or rags, I think they're, like, on drugs. And, like, others, like, in Norristown High, do you know any stereotypes that us as, like, a school know about?
The clothing situation. Like, I know when I was younger, I used to dress like a boy, like, all the time, because that's what I hung around with my older brother, so it was baggy pants, baggy shirt, all the way.
I used to dress like that too because I got two brothers and I didn't have a sister until like a couple years ago. So I was basically hanging around like all boys. I used to like play football with them. I used to wear like just jeans and a white tee and sneaks and hoodie. And now like I wouldn't even think of putting on like a white tee and like some sneaks and stuff like that.
Well, for me, I don't know. It was the environment that I lived in. Wasn't like where was I going? Like, on a farm, like with heels on. Like really, like so I just wore like whatever I felt like. But now, like since I grew up and I moved to Norristown, I like dressing like this. So that's what I did when I felt like it. But also in Norristown, with what you were saying about the dressing with the gay, like people think that if you hang out with gay people and you dress that way, then you're automatically gay. I don't know if that's true or not.
Dress that way too.
Yeah, and they
just hanging with them.
and it's like whispers going around, rumors like, oh, she's gay or something.
Or how guys are like metro.
Yeah.
They're not gay just because they're a little bit feminine.
And just because they look nice.
You know what I mean? Get their eyebrows
they know
done.
that keep yourself
Yeah,
clean.
but there's a
Yeah.
limit though. You can look nice, but you don't. Why is your eyebrows arched? You know?
No, because I know this one boy, he had to get it because he had like a unibrow. It was pretty sad. And yeah, he had to get his eyebrows done. His eyebrows look nicer than mine, hey, but
I hear that.
but he don't got no unibrow, so go ahead to him.
I know a couple guys that get their eyebrows done and they're far from gay.
Yeah,
That's
It's
still
called high
crazy.
maintenance, guys.
yeah, it's basically what that.
If you want to look nice, then go ahead and do what you got to do. Obviously, they don't care what people think about them. People are going to stereotype them anyway.
Any other Norristown stereotypes? I got some. Well,
Like, you know how there are different groups, like, there can be, like, a preppy group of kids, like, a gothic group, like, a ghetto group. Like, there's all different types of groups that people hang around, and if they, like, see people in different groups, they can just stereotype them, like, oh, like, she's gothic or something like that. Oh, she's preppy, so I don't like her. Like, she's ghetto, like, she talk too much. Like, she's all loud and ghetto. Like, people stereotype people like that.
yeah, and also like what you were talking about, stereotyping like that, like just because some people in your group like that are ghetto might be loud, that doesn't mean all of them are loud, even though birds of a feather. Yeah, about that saying, like birds of a feather flock together. Is that true? No, it's not true.
It used to be, but not no more. I don't. Everybody just learned because I think that came from like everybody was trying to find their place in the group. You know what I mean? And I think everybody's more like being an individual now.
Like when you're in elementary school, it's like, hey, I want to be your friend. So
Yeah,
like you.
yeah, exactly.
it's not
But
like
now
that.
everybody's older now. Everybody has their own little style. Everybody actually is starting to find out who they want to be. So even though you still may have them friends, you're all different. And everything.
Yeah, and also like another race thing, like there's a whole lot of them, but like it's not true that all Asians do karate and stuff. Like
Yeah.
I don't know a lot. I know some black people that do karate.
Yeah, and I know sometimes I stereotype because every time I see an Asian person, I always think they're Chinese. And they be like, no, I'm Cambodian, no, I'm Vietnamese, I'm all this, and they get so mad.
so
But that's
crazy.
all I know. I always say they're
I
Chinese.
just say
or something.
Asian.
You know how Mexican people, or Puerto Rican, hate when,
Call them
when they
Mexican.
get called Mexicans,
Yeah.
they hate that.
Or like some Puerto Rican hate when we call it Dominican. I'm like, okay.
Are you upset about that?
Okay.
I think that never happened to me. Nobody ever called me like African. Like black people, you know how there's different things like you know called.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and God
It
forbid
kinda
you
looks
too
similar.
dark. Are you from Africa or where are you
They
from?
do say that, though, around
Yeah,
here.
exactly,
Oh,
especially
Are you
if,
Jamaican? Are you African?
yeah, I know.
Anyway, like I remember when I used to live in Hatfield, and then because there wasn't a lot of black people, and then there was this one black Welsh lady. She was like the substitute, and then this little boy was like, "Is that your mom?" I was like, "She is not my mom." Like, oh my god. So, I guess my friend knew her. We got like some free chicken, but that's all. That was pretty funny. Like, that's not my mom who works at school.
I remember when you had first came in this school and you were in my class, I was like, who is she? Because you were all, I don't know. I knew you had came from like a white school or whatever, and I was like, well, she probably acts white or whatever. But then you were cool once I got to know you. So I was like, oh, she's cool.
Honestly, do you think any of you have stereotyped like a person or group, not even knowing it, and then later you're like, wow, I can't believe I just did
Yeah.
that.
Everybody does it.
Like one of my friends, she dresses like all the time with heels and everything. And when I was maybe like 10th grade, I didn't want to talk to her until one of my other friends were like best friends with her, so I got to know her. And it's like she's not like that at all.
I used to hang around like a whole bunch of white people until like 10th grade, and then I started hanging with a whole bunch of black people. But now, like, I just hang like around a mixed group of people. Guess because I got older, and I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, like when I first came here, like they were like, or no, my cousin, like Lynette already met him. He's in the Navy. He's like, why do you talk white? I'm like, what do you mean you talk white? And he was like, "You talk white." I'm like, "Tyrese, why you talk country?" 'Cause he's like Southern Maryland. I'm like, "Why do you talk country?" He's like, "I don't talk country." I'm like, oh, "Okay." He be on me the whole night, like, "Can you back up? Like, go and eat somewhere." And then, I'm like, I don't know. That's just how it was. Like, grew up, but I can't do anything about it. And also with my friends, like, I've always hung out with a mixed group of people and everything like that. But
People say I talk white. I don't think so. They say I act white too, but I don't think
well,
so.
how you
either.
supposed to act? Like, I don't
How
know.
you talk like, oh my God. Oh yeah.
How you
I
act
don't
black?
talk like
How you
that.
act black?
I
don't
know, right? Because when I think about it,
They probably think like how you
supposed to
act
be
black,
loud.
you're supposed to be loud and ghetto and stuff, like from the hood. And if you act white, you gotta be in like this rich neighborhood or something like that.
But who wants to be that? Who wants to have, like, I don't think that's cool. To live in a dirty place, but. And also, like, stereotyping, I know that I did it, but I thought, like, Asians were smart, because all the Asians that I knew were so smart, and they did the violin and everything. But I just always thought that they were, like, really smart, because that's all I knew, like, honestly. I haven't met, like, one, I haven't met, like, one Asian that didn't, like, try their hardest and really dig.
I do.
Do I know one?
I don't like one.
I know
know.
like a couple.
Really? Do you know that many Asians in Northern?
Well, I mean, you know.
I know a few.
I know like 5.
There was a lot of Asians and Indian kids, and I was like, where are all the Indians when I came here? So I don't know. Like
I
Indians
just call them the same.
yeah, that's fine.
I guess that's stereotype.
Yeah, Indians from India. We had a lot of them. I don't know, they were cool, but I don't know. Never mind.
People stereotype like Mexicans, especially in Norristown.
When people say evil things, like bad things like that, I don't say that. Like I don't say bad things about people. I try not
Try
to,
not
maybe.
to.
But I never called a Mexican dirty. I wish I would. I think that's really mean.
I have said a couple comments about that.
Yeah, I said a couple mean things.
I said, dang, that's a lot. Like every week.
They just drive wild though.
They drive wild
They
and they
drive
drive in
9 years
packs.
old.
Stereotyping.
They drive.
Yeah, that is stereotype. See, we
Oh
sit
my
here
gosh.
stereotyping them.
Oh my gosh, so this is going to air on TV.
I bet you
That's going to be boycotted.
I bet you they probably stereotype us too.
I know,
All
them
the
black
time,
people.
they do.
All the time.
But it's life. I mean,
Yeah, that's
in
what I'm
life,
saying.
people
There's a lot of
stereotype.
people they
So you
stereotype.
can't help it.
Yeah, see, this is where we're coming to a conclusion of stereotyping, and we can't help it, and it just happens. And I don't.
Because that's part of what we were taught. So
As we grow up, we might not stereotype as much, or
Yeah, because you
Hopefully.
mature. and-
especially when you get in college, you want to meet
You
a
wanna,
whole
like-
broad amount of people,
Yeah.
and so it's,
yeah.
So I think they're stereotyping when like with young pregnancy, but like
Yeah,
ethnic
that's true.
pregnancy, like
Well, at least we got some things out of our system, and we've been able to kind of, I don't know, say some things about stereotyping, but I don't know.
Hi, I'm Kara Kuzer, and I'm here today with Mr. Davis. How are you?
Great, how are you?
Good. Today, I kind of want to talk to you a little bit about stereotyping and how it kind of affects everyone.
Great. What is it you would like to know?
Well, I guess really the question that kind of comes up a lot of times is why do people do it? A lot of times it happens by accident, but there's also times where people do it purposely. Why do you think that is?
Well, oftentimes it's a learned response, just like you learn in what order to do things in your home, because it's a conditioned response in many cases, where individuals have learned to treat women a certain way. Little girls wear pink, little boys wear blue, so therefore if it looks like it's a boy, then he's probably going to have this type of response. It looks like it's a girl, then she's probably going to have another type of response, simply based on their gender.
Okay. Is there any way we as human beings can veer ourselves away from that? Is there any kind of thing that we can learn when we're young?
Well, sure. It takes a conscious effort. You're oftentimes corrected by your parents, grandparents. I think exposure to various individuals, groups, organizations will certainly help that. In other words, if you heard something negative based on a certain religious group. But then if you go to that a group event for that particular religious group, you may find that all those things you've heard over the years doesn't quite fit. So one of the ways to get rid of those negative thoughts or ideas that you didn't even know were negative is to immerse yourself in the environment. Think about it from this perspective. If you wanted to learn Spanish, you can take a class, but until you immerse yourself in the environment, you're not going to necessarily be able to just strictly speak Spanish and think from a Spanish perspective. So in order to learn about another group more effectively and maybe find out that some of the thoughts that you have may not in fact be accurate, then you immerse yourself in that environment and you'll learn a little more than what you would have just by talking to people about the group.
So you're saying basically if we broaden our horizons and kind of like really experience other cultures, that could make us more aware of, you know, how things really are.
Certainly. You know, oftentimes individuals operate out of fear, and fear of the unknown eliminates the possibility for a logical sequence of events.
It's really interesting that you say that because you always hear on TV, you know, of a man of Arabic descent being kicked off a plane because, you know, of what happened on 9/11. So people on that plane with him are probably thinking, oh, you know, he's just like everyone else, and because they're afraid of the unknown because they don't want, you know, history to repeat itself. That's really interesting that you say that.
Correct. Yeah, I just talked with a young man 2 days ago, actually, who's going to fly overseas for the first time by himself, and his father is sending him, and he does have a little olive colored skin, and I started thinking exactly, okay, how's this young man going to be able to handle this if something happens and he's by himself for his first ever trip overseas by himself?
Right. What kind of things do you think people do that kind of like sets off that prejudgment stage? What are the actions that people do, maybe by mistake?
Well, you know, there's kind of not really an order, but it's based on prejudices. What is prejudice?
Judging someone and you don't even really know who they are or what they stand for?
Very good. So you're prejudging on insufficient information,
Okay.
which leads to discriminatory behavior. Mixed in there somewhere along the way is, in fact, stereotyping, because you have to have some preconceived ideas in order to act, which discrimination is acting on the preconceived ideas that involves the stereotyping.
You seem to know a lot about this. What do you do?
Well, I'm a college counselor.
College counselor, and you what kind of issues do you deal with?
We deal with a lot of things, but I'm one of the primary workshop presenters as it relates to diversity issues, which is very involved. In America, we spend so little time on college campuses, high schools, or maybe even at the middle school level, talking about issues of race, gender, sexual orientation, when in fact, those are hot button topics throughout the land. Why we don't focus more time on these areas, you know, I have to commend your school district for actually talking about this now.
Very true. So I wish you luck in the rest of your job at Monco. You seem to know what you're talking about. So thank you for coming out today.
Yes, and thank you, and we hope to see you on campus.
Thank you. Now back to you.